Today, we become legends.
This time on Titan Talk, they went over some god stats like win rate, most damage taken, most damage dealt, etc., as well as some interesting questions on green buff, the next 3 gods coming to the game, and a whole lot more. So without further ado, let's jump into the recap. First up, a couple of hotfixes that have gone out since the last show. Eset's one not knocking back minions has been fixed, which is also a pretty decent buff to her in general, as it interrupts enemy minions from attacking your own wave, effectively slowing down the enemy's clear, and can prevent you from taking extra damage from enemy minions if you aggro them while also hitting the enemy god with Wind Gust. Loki's Vanish also got a fix. Previously, the one's enhanced basic attack had a 2-second longer duration than the actual stealth had. It is now the same duration as the stealth. They fixed Mulan's banner never returning if it was deployed when you died, which is a pretty big one and effectively a buff as well. Ula's passive cooldown reduction for the opposite stance abilities apparently was just not working, and that now will work. There's a lot of bug fixes that are actually just decent buffs in this patch for sure. Similarly, they fixed Chronos Pendant's passive cooldown reduction not working properly, but didn't elaborate. I'm not entirely sure what this means, as I'm pretty certain the 1-second cooldown does work, but maybe in certain cases it didn't, or it wasn't applying properly or something like that. They also fixed Necronomicon losing stacks if you move it around in your inventory, and finally they fixed the ground targeter stopping short of the range ruler length, so those should now be the same. Eset's aspect and double worshippers are now live in game as well if you want to check that out and grind some worshippers. And finally, for the announcements at the top of the show, there will be no Titan Talk on Monday, as Kilgoon has some personal time off that's falling on that day, and Hindu doesn't work Mondays. That's all the announcements though. Let's jump into the Q&A section of the show. Someone mentioned Necronomicon stacking from god clones, and Hindu said he's already made the team aware of that one, so there should be a fix for that soon, hopefully. Someone asked, since they usually reveal the next gods on the Monday before the latest god is showcased, and there will be no Titan Talk on Monday, could we get the god reveals now? And Hindu said no, unfortunately. They will likely reveal the next gods on Wednesday or Friday next week, and they have said previously that they're going to reveal all 3 of the remaining gods for the year this time. We also know from previous shows that all 3 will be goddesses, and based on the most recent 2 gods being a mid in Eset and a support in Sylvanas, we should probably expect these next 3 to be a jungler, a solo laner, and an ADC, so speculate away in the comments. Someone mentioned that Xbalanque doesn't get assist credit when someone dies under the effects of his ultimate, and Clumsy said that was intentional when they brought him over, and they don't plan to buff him by bringing that back. The same is true for other cases like Nua's ult vision portion specifically. Obviously, if the damage hits, you get assist credit, but if the revealed enemy dies before being hit by the damage, you don't, and that is intended right now. Someone asked how Eset's been doing so far and if they're planning any nerfs, and Clumsy said generally from what he's seen, she's been doing pretty good, and he's going to be talking with the team about balance changes later today, but it's very early, and there have been several hotfixes that are effectively buffs to Eset, like the slow on her 3 being fixed, and this patch's minion knockback fix on her 1, as well as her aspect launching, so it's probably too early to tell exactly where she's gonna fall on the balance side of things. Someone brought up green buff again, and Clumsy said that generally they just feel like with how buffs work differently in Smite 2, it wouldn't be as simple as just adding green buffs so the support has a buff. It's possible, even likely maybe, that it just ends up being given to the jungler or solo laner anyway. In Smite 1, every other role already had a buff and physically couldn't steal the green buff from the support if they had their own buff. But in Smite 2, it's a bit different, which is why they're more hesitant to just add green buff in the same way it existed in Smite 1. Of course, this ties a little bit into supports not feeling tanky enough, which Clumsy also touched on, as he's seen a lot of requests in the community to just like buff all Guardian based tank stats across the board, for example. And he said that's something they would not love to do because of their goal of promoting flexibility in Smite 2. When all gods base stats are closer to each other, it allows things like Aspect Scylla support to have more a shot at being viable. Whereas if Scylla had 1600 base HP and Guardians had 3000 base HP, you're much less likely to find success with a non-Guardian tank build or playstyle. Hindu brought up some stats for the last few days of ranked and asked chat to guess the top 7 highest win rate gods, which turned out to be Xbalanque, Mulan, Aspect Bats, Hecate Aspect, Khepri Aspect, Nuwa, and Odin. Do keep in mind though that this was just from a few days of rank, so the match count is likely pretty low on a lot of these, especially some of the less popular picks like Hecate Aspect and Khepri. It could absolutely be 1 or 2 dedicated mains of these gods pulling up their win rate substantially. They also went over the highest win rate gods in casual as a comparison to ranked, and those were Anubis, Aspect Loki, Nuwa, Xbalanque, Mulan, Cupid, and Aspect Apollo. You can definitely see a little bit of the casual difference coming in here, I think, with stuff like Anubis, for example. Though there are definitely some similarities as well, with Xbalanque, Mulan, and Nuwa being top 3 in both ranked and casuals. They also mentioned that generally, like, the community sentiment towards Nuwa doesn't really align with her actual win rates. Nuwa was doing incredibly well, and that's why she actually got a nerf, and even after the nerf to her ultimate, she's still top 7 in both ranked and casuals. Hindu also went over the top average damage done per game, and those were, of course, Nuwa was number 1, but also Vulcan, Aspect Sol, and Tsukuyomi. And these picks all make sense, to be honest. Obviously, Nuwa was far and away the top average damage done, because she just gets free damage on her ultimate on the entire enemy team. Other mages like Vulcan and Aspect Sol make sense as well, and then Tsukuyomi, he just does a lot of damage, and he kind of pokes like a mage, so that kind of makes sense. For the lowest damage done, there was Kepri, Aspect Guan Yu, Ganesha, and Aspect Fenrir. These are all pretty sensible. Aspect Fenrir was a little bit surprising to me, because I do feel like, you know, Aspect Fenrir, he doesn't do as much damage with the Brutalize, but he's still kind of an assassin in a little bit of a way. You would expect a bit more damage out of him, but he was pretty low. And then Kepri and Ganesha, two very defensive supports that both have abilities that don't do any damage. And then Aspect Guan Yu, he's kind of like a heal bot, really, so it kind of makes sense that he's not doing a whole lot of damage. For top damage taken, there was Aspect Apollo, Aspect Guan Yu, Cerberus, Kepri, Geb, and Aspect Nemesis. These make a lot of sense, to be honest. Kepri, Geb are just kind of general supports that are going to be taking a lot of damage because they're in there. Aspect Nemesis, Cerberus, and Aspect Guan Yu are obviously very high sustain characters. Aspect Nemesis obviously specifically wants to be taking a bunch of damage, so that makes a lot of sense. And then Aspect Apollo makes sense as well, because he's not going to be mitigating a lot of damage, because he typically builds a ton of health and not that many protections, so he's going to be taking a lot of damage, but not mitigating much of it. For least damage taken, there was Neith, Janus, Scylla, Merlin, Hecate, Kukulkan, Vulcan, and Nuwa. These all make sense, to be honest. They're literally all just mages, other than Neith, but Neith is basically a mage. And they all have pretty solid mobility or ways to keep themselves safe. You know, Merlin has the blink, Hecate has her ultimate, Cuckoo has his dash, Vulcan a little bit less safe, but can throw his damage from range and stuff like that. And then a lot of these just have like general good movement abilities that can keep them safe, so they don't take a lot of damage. And finally, Hindu also asked chat to guess the highest win rate, low pick rate gods, which were Hecate and Ares Aspect. And these two, I think, make sense. Hecate is generally harder to play god that is less popular, but does very well in the right hands. And Ares Aspect is basically just Ares, but worse, and Ares is OP, so it makes sense that both versions of Ares have a high win rate, but the Aspect is low pick rate, because base Ares is just a better version for the most part. Moving on, though, someone asked how the new items are doing in general, and Clumsy said they're all a fairly low purchase rate, which he did expect, because they are a bit more niche than your typical item. He did say that Chandra's Grace is doing the best out of them, and Jabalban Effigy is doing the worst. And finally, someone asked for more soft anti-heal items, and Clumsy said that is something on their radar for sure, and they have recently changed Brawler's Beatstick to be a bit more easy to fit into builds by having both kinds of protections. They're aware of the sentiment in the community that we do want more soft anti-heal items, so hopefully we'll get some of those soon. But that's everything discussed on the show. Don't forget to drop a like before you leave if you enjoy these quick recaps, and I'll catch you guys for another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.